let's call it those who are partners. And at what point does one now begin to define certain boundaries? Because if you're governed by boundaries, I think what you'll realize mostly happens is that people, Chris, you mentioned that you need to agree, are we dating? But most people sort of assume that you're dating.
One of the biggest mistakes, in fact, people make in dating relationships is not defining the boundaries. You get a lot of couples where they start going out, hanging out, whatever they care to call it. It's particularly noticeable when you have the modern phenomena of groups of people who are friends hanging out together, and then they start dating within the group. If you don't define the boundaries, then you're not dating. It's not courtship, and they make that mistake.
Okay, Ken, at what point do you now begin to define?
You know, when you talk about boundaries, you're actually pointing at maximum and minimum elasticity. How far can you push? How far can you wait? You know, and the idea of boundaries is sometimes multi-dimensional. There are people who use boundaries as walls in a relationship, and you say, hey, I'm not going beyond this point. And you could have been dating for forever, or you can be married for many years, but somebody will still have those boundaries that you can't, like those walls you cannot bring down. But if you're talking about permeability, where you use it as a point of transition into the other person's life, then the boundaries definitely, I think, serve a very positive role. They serve a very positive purpose. Because if you think of someone without boundaries, it means they can do anything, anytime, anywhere. Yeah, but once you have your boundaries, even individually as a person, there are things you cannot do. And your friend will know that, your mother will know that, and your spouse will know that. That there are certain things I can't push Chris beyond. So therefore, that's your boundary. But the key thing in a relationship is for the other person to understand those boundaries. Because mostly people don't. In fact, if you ask someone, what's the worst that your husband can take, they'll probably tell you something totally outrageous, which is not what the worst he can take. Yeah, that means they still don't really understand it. And it's very difficult for people to finally say, oh, now I know. Chris doesn't like this, or this is. But sometimes what you do not like is not necessarily the farthest you can go. It's just something you don't like in terms of character, in terms of behavior. But in you as a person, there are things you avow right from youth that you cannot go beyond, and that's how your boundary is set.
Okay, Carol, let's break this down and come to the basics. When, like Chris was explaining, many people meet in certain forums. Maybe it's within an office, maybe it is a friend's party, and you're friends. But at some point, that relationship may develop to a different kind of a relationship where now you expect certain things and they expect certain things. But oftentimes you'll find that you never sit down to agree that now, why didn't you text me? You'll just find somebody has reacted and you think, okay, why are they reacting? So at what point does one now need to put their foot down, or let me call the house to order and say, let's define this relationship. After defining, these are the boundaries or parameters that we're setting.
Usually the boundaries will come up, right? Like you won't exactly have one meeting where you define all the boundaries, because they come up as needed. For example, when you start dating, at some point the guy might ask, are you ready to take this to the next level? And the girl will agree yes. So at least you know that you've begun defining something. We're exclusive. Does that mean we're not dating other people? That is defined. That is clear. So as you go along, right, you start defining things that are not acceptable. Because the thing with boundaries, many times we assume that people can read your mind. Someone can read your mind and know that I do not want you to talk to your ex-girlfriend, or I want to be called 3 times a day, or I expect you to be free on Saturdays. No one can read your mind. No one can know such things. So in fact, in order to set appropriate boundaries, you first of all need to know what you want, what you need. Because if you do not know what you need and specify to your partner, not like a contract,